The movie begins in a forest with a sinister appearance, where tall trees block most of the sunlight except for a few rays that manage to enter. Suddenly, a dirty hand grabs a tree, and we soon see the silhouette of a teenager in a yellow hoodie running exhaustively. The figure looks extremely tired as it collapses onto the ground after a few minutes of running, leaning on its knees and arms while its fingers claw at the muddy ground around it as it gasps for air. In the next scene, we see a red bus driving down a lonely road. Surrounded by tall trees inside the bus, Nolan, a teenager with his gray hoodie up, has his headphones plugged in, looking out the window as the bus moves forward. We notice a teenage girl sitting in an adjacent seat drawing in a sketchbook. Nolan glances at her and smiles shyly, clearly harboring a crush. The voice on the radio announces a lunar eclipse that will occur soon, and the driver lowers the radio volume before turning to the teenagers and asking if they will watch it. Carl, one of the teenage boys, declared CL that he has already seen something on YouTube, and Queenie, the girl next to him, says she will watch it with her dad. The two begin to argue for a moment before calming down after a minute of silence. Reggie, a teenager with a nose piercing who was sitting alone in the back, crushes an empty can and throws it at Nolan, who is in the front, hitting him in the head. When Nolan turns around, Reggie shows him the middle finger, and he retaliates before turning back to see Bess, his crush, smiling at him. The boys joke around for a minute, and after the motion dies down, Joe asks Bess if she will watch the lunar eclipse when she responds uncertainly. Carl laughs and nudges Queenie beside him while teasing Nolan and Bess. Joe continues to speak about the lunar eclipse and how it will be one of the longest and most fascinating, while Reggie mocks Joe for driving slowly. The bus keeps driving and soon enters a dark road with tall trees. Blocking the sunlight in the middle of the road, there is a fallen tree, but instead of turning back, Joe puts the bus in reverse and turns onto a smaller path, a hidden shortcut among the trees. The bus continues down the path and soon emerges onto an open but desolate road with no trees in sight and a thick fog hanging above. The teenagers look out the window, scared as the fog obscures their view. As the bus slowly advances, they reach a small road with denser trees than before and are forced to stop again. Due to a dead deer in the middle of the road, Joe gets off the bus, warning the passengers to stay inside, and begins dragging the animal out of their way. The friends consider helping him before deciding it's not worth it. Joe drags the animal to the trees beside the road and stands up to wipe his palms before something makes him stop. The teenagers tease each other in jokes on the bus while they wait for Joe to return. Carl starts telling a funny story to his friends, but he is soon interrupted by Joe coming back with a gun pointed at his head. The laughter stops abruptly, and all the teenagers have the same terrified and confused expression as they see a worn-looking man enter right after the driver. He greets them threateningly with the gun in his hand, still pointed at Joe's temple, and orders everyone to sit down. Joe urges them to remain calm, assuring them that the man won't hurt them. The man with the gun does not seem impressed by this declaration and shoves Joe, ordering him to just sit and drive without saying anything, directing the order at the teenagers as well, and they all sit quietly except for Reggie, who stubbornly maintains his posture for a moment before turning to his seat at the back of the bus. The armed man turns back to Joe in the driver's seat and orders him to drive while the doors close. Carl suddenly remembers something while watching the maniac in front. The scene shifts to a few days earlier when Carl was having lunch with his dad, Chris. He was telling the older man a story about how he helped save a girl from bullies at school, and we can see that his dad does not quite believe the story, but allows him to tell it anyway. The story becomes more intense and absurd, but his dad maintains a false expression of surprise and admiration. When he tries to describe how he defeated the bullies, he accidentally spills ketchup on his dad's tablet. As Chris cleans up the mess, we see a news article displayed on the screen with the face of a convicted criminal standing out. Carl asks his dad about it, and Chris tells him about the serial killer who just escaped from prison. He explains that they are doing everything they can to find him because he is a lunatic who eats tongues and seems to have an obsession with teenagers. Chris teases Carl, telling him, after this, Jasper takes off the device on his head and asks Henry how the signing went. Henry mentions that it was fine, and Jasper asks if he got a Basat for him. Henry says he didn't, and even though Jasper is bothered by this, he just asks if their ad looks good. Henry says it does, but as Jasper sees it, he realizes that he was blurred out. He doesn't look happy about this. Jones shows up and tells him to take a picture of her with Henry. Jasper looks disappointed because he has a crush on Jones, but he still takes the picture for her. After this, Henry notices that Jasper isn't happy and he asks what the problem is. Jasper then complains about how Henry gets all the credit for their joint efforts in fighting crime in the city. Henry jokingly asks if he wants a gold star for his efforts. Our ad. But Jasper mentions that he's tired of people always thinking Henry is his boss. Henry doesn't seem to have a problem with being referred to as the boss, but Jasper gets pissed and says they'll meet at home. Just then, Henry tells Jasper that he's moving out of their shared apartment because he wants his own place. Jasper doesn't get this, but Henry says they're not kids anymore and that it might be best if they live separately. Jasper then asks if they're still a team, but Henry just says he can come over to his new place anytime he wants. Jasper doesn't like his response, and he just walks away from the scene as Schwoz follows him. Piper tells Henry that what he did to Jasper was not cool. Henry doesn't respond to this, and he just heads over to the BizWatch headquarters after he gets a message from the owners. When he gets there, Henry sees that the entire office has been scattered, and as he wonders what's going on, Blackout shows up out of nowhere and throws him out of the window. Coincidentally, Missy has already gotten the rad to work well, and as it creates a strange kind of energy that flips the pages of his room as he also realizes that he's wearing his old Kid Danger costume. He starts wondering if he's dead. Missy then tells him that he's in Newtown, but he doesn't seem to know what she's talking about. As he then looks scared and asks why he's wearing his old costume, Missy says she just brought him back from the dead. Henry doesn't understand this, but before Missy can say anything else, Gemma. She refuses to do this because she doesn't understand why Kid Danger is in Mrs. room, but Missy forces her to leave. Gemma eventually leaves, and Henry realizes that Missy has several things in her room with his face on them. Missy then properly introduces herself and tells Henry that she's a super fan of Kid Danger. Henry doesn't care about this, and he asks how he got to her room. Missy then shows him the rad and says it's what she used to bring him back from the dead. Henry says he didn't die. I'm sorry, what? But Missy thinks he's lying because everyone knows he sacrificed himself to save Swellview. Henry then mentions that he faked his death after saving Swellview. He adds that he did it to move on with his life and protect his family so that his enemies would stop trying to hurt them. Missy cannot believe he actually faked his death and left his fans traumatized, but Henry says sorry for this. She then asks what he has been doing since he left Swellview, and he says he's now fighting crime in Dystopia. Missy doesn't know where Dystopia is, but Henry says it's an island in the Pacific Ocean. Missy then asks if Charlotte and Jasper are there with him, but Henry looks at his secret identity and that his eye mask didn't really cover his face. Henry then asks why she brought him to the new town, and Missy says there's so much crime happening there. She adds that she and Gemma always get robbed on their way back from school, and no one does anything about it. Henry says he needs to get back to Dystopia, but Missy sounds disappointed and asks if he doesn't want to fight crime with her. Henry says she seems like a nice girl, but that he's doing his own thing in Dystopia and doesn't want to change. I'd like the key off Joe's body, but before Carl to the front of the bus, and before anyone can stop her, she jumps out. Nolan tries to stop her while the others in the bus hold their breath. When she reaches what's left of Joe, she crouches, trembling, to put her hand in his pocket to get the key. She looks at his face and starts to cry, but then a more distant sound in the darkness distracts her, so she grabs the flashlight and turns it on. A sudden movement startles her, and she rushes back into the bus. Pedro takes her. Key orders Reggie to start the engine while Nolan asks about Joe, and with a negative shake of her head, she says he's no longer alive. Reggie tries to start the bus, but the engine won't turn over. Pedro begins to grow all's four eyes upset by the insult, and quickly shoves Pedro, allowing Reggie to grab his gun with the rolls. Reversed, Pedro steps back for a moment while Reggie points the gun at him, but in an attempt to provoke him, Pedro starts calling Reggie names and tells the boy that he won't pull the trigger because he lacks courage. Something hits the bus, and the teenagers get distracted for a moment, allowing Pedro to regain the gun. But this time he points it upwards while the teenagers begin to whimper and become afraid. Pedro jumps out of the bus and starts yelling for the creature to come out of the darkness soon as the plea is answered. And upon seeing the monster, he freezes in disbelief and smiles shyly. A loud crash from outside surprises the friends, and they cluster in the aisle as they hear the sounds of gunshots echo, causing the girls to scream and the boys to curse all. Panic ensues, and Reggie worsens things by turning to Carl and insulting him. Nolan tries to calm him down, but he tries to fight too, so the girls intervene. The fight is interrupted when a bizarre roar happens just outside the window, and upon seeing the creature holding Pedro's dead body in its hand, they begin to scream and huddle down between the seats. The creature growls and grunts, and the friends realize that the monster's hands have enormous claws that are embedded in the head of the miserable man. After it seems to fall out of reach, they try to figure out how to stay alive, and Reggie, annoyed, goes to sit in his usual seat at the back of the bus. The radio turns on, but they can't understand what the other person is saying, and while they try to listen, Reggie has a vertigo attack at the back of the bus. He stands up and turns to medically before falling back into his seat. In the next scene, the teams can hear the familiar crunching noise indicating the creature's arrival. They huddle together and turn toward the sound, starting to scream as the bus begins to shake. We see the long clawed fingers of the creature opening the front door and entering while their screams intensify. They run toward the other door and Reggie tries to force it open. Bess grabs the flashlight and points it toward the creature. This seems to have an effect on it, so they hold it off for a while before the door finally opens and they escape. Bess leads the way toward a door she saw earlier in the tunnel, and they find themselves in a bunker. After walking for some time, they find a room and decide to stay there after Nolan inspects it. On a nearby wall, Nolan and Bess find a drawing that seems to be the floor plan of a military fortress. They decide that they need to find the control tower to turn on the lights, but Reggie thinks they won't find it. They start talking about Joe, and Reggie tells the others that Joe knew his dad. Here we discover that Reggie's dad is in prison. Reggie sadly adds that his dad is innocent and is only serving time because he was framed. Nolan takes the map from the wall and leads the friends, pointing to the control room and Bess. Offers to go with him, Nolan is pleasantly surprised, and Reggie wishes them good luck before the two go to find the control tower. On the way, they have a good conversation. Nolan takes the opportunity to compliment her on her drawings. He tells her about his mom, who used to paint, and how his favorite painting is of a blue sea by the ocean, back in the safe room. Carl makes drum noises and gestures as he lists everything he wants to eat between the beats. Reggie silences him, but he doesn't hear, and they end up getting into a silly fight when Queenie interrupts the two, saying she needs to empty her bladder and the boys vote for Reggie to accompany her, allowing Carl to keep making noise, comment that the plan obviously didn't work while pointing her flaming torch toward an inner cave where a dead body lies. Reggie and Queenie walk a bit, but before she chooses a place to urinate, Queenie tells Reggie turns around and moves away from her, before she squats down to do what she needs while busy. Reggie tells her that she looks cute when she's angry, and that he plans to make her angry more often, expecting a response but getting none. Reggie calls for her, unsure if he should turn around. He eventually decides yes and realizes that she has disappeared. Scared, he races back to the safe room to call for Carl. On the other hand, Nolan and Bess continue looking around, and eventually Bess calls for her. Friend with good news, they found the main panel, blames her. They eventually find her in a dark hallway, screaming underneath the creature that seems to be feeding on her. Reggie bravely runs to her and tries to stare the monster down with a lit torch in his hand, enough for Carl to get Queenie to safety. The creature knocks the flashlight from Reggie's hand into a puddle on the ground, extinguishing the fire. Meanwhile, Nolan struggles to flip the switch, so Best helps him. Carl manages to take Queenie to a safer place, and when they catch their breath, she remembers Reggie. They go back for their friend, and Carl calls for Reggie, who is in trouble with the creature above him. Something is dripping from the monster's mouth onto Reggie's chin, and it appears to be blood. Fortunately, before the worst happens, Bess and Nolan finally manage to move the large switch, turning on all the lights of the dark hallways. The creature screams and pulls away from the boy. Disappearing from sight, Carl smiles with relief as he realizes that his friends found the generator in time. Back in the control room, Nolan and Bess find a small staircase leading down. They are led into a cave covered with newspapers and pictures of the creature that killed Joe. The two also find books and diaries that say someone was obsessed with the creature. Nolan finds a Polaroid of her, and Reggie announces that it's his fault for leaving her alone. He also tries to get them to leave, but Bess explains that they can't. The group goes to the control tower, where they observe the body of a The little girl sees something in front of her and freezes in her place. Julius finally notices, but it's too late, as a terrifying scream echoes from the tunnel with panic rising in his chest. Julius takes steps back, keeping his eyes fixed on the tunnel and on what's inside. Another scream is heard from the tunnel, and this time from the creature, making him turn and run as fast as he can. We see a 50-year-old man hugging the book to his chest. It's Julius, now old, who even decades later cannot get the incident out of his head. He enters the tunnel to find the creature that killed his sister with a frightened but determined look. Sometime later, we see him surrounded by candles, drawing the plans for a machine he intends to use against the flesh-eating creature. In the next scene, we see him building his project, and while reminiscing about his plans, he draws more inspiration by looking at a photo of his sister. Back in the present, the friends reflect on the story of a desperate man who risked his life to end the creature. They jot down the theories they have, and that the creature is like that won't stop looking for Queenie until it finishes. We see how Julius started, but Queenie doesn't want anyone to get hurt because of her. She voices her complaints, and her friends assure her that no one will be left behind. They share a group hug for a moment before they start working. They test old equipment, outline game plans, work together to get the light machine running, and finally formulate a plan to capture the night nomad. They take Queenie to a safe place and set the plan in motion by luring the creature into the safe room with their bloodied clothes. The plan seems to be working until Bess cannot flip the switch by herself. Things spiral out of control with the light not working and Reggie's button doing nothing when he presses it. Nolan nearly gets caught by the night nomad, but Bess saves him by causing a distraction. The creature goes after him instead and almost finds her hiding with Queenie behind a door, but a distant crash distracts it. They lure the creature into a room with Queenie's bloodied clothes in front of a light source. She grabs the clothes as they hoped, and then they quickly turn on the light, blinding it momentarily. Carl bravely stabs it, buying time for the girls to run. Queenie and Bess manage to escape the tunnel alive and breathe a sigh of relief. They look back and see the creature screaming at them, but unable to leave the darkness of the tunnel. In the distance, the boys run toward them with torches lit, cornering the creature. They reach the night road and set it on fire, and then, happy and relieved, they watch it burn to death in the next scene. Nolan's voice narrates the end. The answer to the riddle Joe made earlier on the bus is courage. He tells us how courage was the lesson of their trial and how even if no one took them seriously, it would stay with them forever. In the end, we see police officers checking the tunnel. One goes deeper to inspect the safe rooms with a flashlight. A loud scream makes him stop and look around. He comes face to face with something, and his flashlight goes out while his eyes widen, and then his screams echo throughout the tunnel. "Hey,